Hey, Kannaway, I'm so happy to be with you this evening, and I am especially happy because I have Dr. Stuart Titus with me. Stuart is, of course, the founder of Medical Marijuana Incorporated. He's the CEO of that company, and he is the driving force in this entire CBD, non-psychoactive cannabis industry in the entire world. In fact, I state frequently when I'm making business presentations that anyone anywhere on planet Earth who offers a CBD cannabidiol product has either borrowed, licensed, or stole intellectual property from Medical Marijuana Incorporated. And this man, he's who started it all and created one of the most remarkable bandwagons, if you will, that I've observed in my whole life. Stuart's a dear friend, and he agreed to come here this evening and talk with us because I've had many people pose questions to me over the course of the last handful of days about the recent passing of the Farm Bill. I think President Trump's going to sign it sometime in the next few days, right?
Tomorrow, Wednesday, yes.
Tomorrow, Wednesday. And so we've been discussing and talking about this end of the prohibition of cannabis for some period of time. Dr. Titus now for a decade. And now we see it becoming a reality, and I've had a number of people posing questions to me about what does this really mean for our business? What does it really mean? What does it mean domestically? What does it mean for our international markets, both those that are currently open and those that will open? The possibility of maybe accelerating some international development as a result of these decisions that have been made by our lawmakers. And so what I asked Dr. Titus to do is to first go through a really meticulous and well-done presentation that outlines where we are, and that would probably take about 30 minutes. And following that presentation, Stuart and I are just going to have a little bit of a conversation to make sure that I draw the proper emphasis to the areas that I think are of greatest importance for the typical Kannaway brand ambassador and or consumer, and also to maybe highlight or bring back around any points of misunderstanding that I may have after listening to the presentation, so that we're all perfectly clear on what this means to us. And I can tell you in advance that the future was bright yesterday. It'll become more bright today and more bright still tomorrow. So Dr. Titus, thank you so much for being here, and it's all yours.
Well, Randy, thank you very kindly for the nice introduction. Everyone, it's a great pleasure to be with you all. As many of you know, and some of you may be newcomers, my name is Stuart Titus. I'm the President, Chief Executive Officer of Kannaway's parent company, Medical Marijuana Incorporated. We were America's first publicly traded cannabis company going back to March of 2009. Back at that time, I was just an investor with the company, and over time I've taken on an increasingly large and significant role as the company has really transformed from a marijuana company into a hemp and CBD company. And certainly it's wonderful historic times for us here in the U.S. With the bringing back of hemp as an agricultural crop. So the presentation I've put together just goes through a little bit of history. Back the U.S. Farm Bill here in 2014 was passed by Congress, signed into law by President Obama.
I'm going to interrupt for 1 second here, rude as that may seem, and just let you all know that we will make available to you the slide presentation, because I know it'll be hard for you to read. And so Samantha will post this on Facebook, the PDF that goes along with all of this. So you need not be making copious notes. Sorry.
Good deal. Thank you, Randy. I appreciate that. And you're always great with all the logistical support. So the Farm Bill of 2014 was passed by Congress, signed into law by President Obama. And basically this legalized industrial hemp to be planted on American soil for research purposes only. And previously, going back to the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, hemp unfortunately had been lumped in with marijuana and been totally eradicated from not only being planted here in America, but also put into the Controlled Substances Act. So many law enforcement agencies, including the DEA, a couple of years ago mentioned that CBD was a Schedule I federally controlled substance, even though they didn't really follow their own procedures and guidelines to so schedule it. Nonetheless, they saw that CBD was becoming very popular. It came from a cannabis plant, and even though they also had lost a federal court ruling in the year 2004, they decided to go ahead and take this action, which has hurt some of our business in the U.S. and certainly has changed some of the dialogue among the states and at state level. But anyway, the Farm Bill of 2014 and over the past years, we now have 40 U.S. states that have passed separate in-state regulations allowing farmers to actually plant hemp within the state as long as farmers can register with the State Department of Agriculture. Now, of course, hemp being illegal at the federal level, there are only a couple of states that have had some very smallish programs such as Colorado and Kentucky, but nonetheless, there is some amount of hemp that's being planted in the U.S., and of course, the passage of the Farm Bill, that's going to change quite significantly. Now, the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018, which is also known as the 2018 U.S. Farm Bill, every 4 years, Congress gets together and considers an appropriation bill to subsidize U.S. farmers and the subsidies paid to the farmers. It's a very hot political issue. A lot of this contains a lot of what we call political pork, and certainly things such as the U.S. government food stamp program and assistance to low-income Americans are also lumped into this very large spending bill. But this year, the Farm Bill contains provisions which will certainly be a tremendous game changer for us here in the U.S. The bill is actually 807 pages. It encompasses $867 billion worth of spending, and of course all the political pork has been in there, but certainly allowing industrial hemp to be planted in the U.S., and certainly Senator Mitch McConnell, as Senate Majority Leader, has had a tremendous role in moving this forward. In his state, Kentucky, many farmers used to plant tobacco, and now with all the tobacco interest moving away from the U.S. up to Canada and other countries, we don't plant the amount of tobacco that we used to. And these farmers in states such as Kentucky and others have been looking for a new crop, and certainly bringing hemp back, I think, is going to have tremendous benefits for the farmers in many of these states. So the Agricultural Improvement Act, in legal terms, basically this is a tremendous historic moment as basically it legalizes the return of industrial hemp, once again being planted by American farmers, and certainly, let me just see, we got a little technical glitch.
Just continue talking.
Are we going?
Stuart.
Are we up and running
Just
still?
continue.
Okay, great. Thanks. Going back to the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937, hemp had been lumped in with marijuana, and unfortunately had been considered fully part of the Controlled Substances Act, and had been eradicated from the ability of American farmers to plant. Now, bringing hemp back, you'll have a wonderful agricultural crop that can compete with wheat, soybeans, barley, oats, etc., and we're certainly excited about that. The hemp derivatives will be fully legal as well, and certainly CBD, being a tremendous derivative with a huge market that's starting to develop, will now certainly change in its rightful place in history here. Now, the U.S. Department of Agriculture in the U.S., the USDA, shall regulate the cultivation of hemp at the federal level, and it is instructed to implement regulations according to the Farm Bill. Certainly, with the Farm Bill, we have the ability to now bring hemp seed over from Europe, and we have different agricultural soils here in the U.S., different climatic zones. It's very interesting to see that a nice hemp seed in Europe sometimes would produce a nice high concentration of CBD with a very low THC concentration that would classify this very technically as hemp. Anything 0.3% or less of THC rather is considered hemp. But when you take this European seed, bring it over to America, sometimes the hemp tests hot, if you will, which means it has a higher than normal THC content, sometimes as much as 1 to 1.5%. And this can potentially be problematic, so the USDA is going to be regulating this. It's going to have provisions if your hemp tests hot to be able to help correct and rectify some of the problems with the new crop that's coming along. But certainly individual states may retain the right to enact their own in-state legislation and develop regulations at the state level, but interestingly enough, all final regulations are subject to USDA approval, and in many instances, federal law trumps the state law. So what might happen in some of these states where currently CBD is illegal, we might actually have to go through a process of lawsuits and litigation to bring this up to the state Supreme Court. Obviously, they're going to rule with a federal law, and certainly that's going to be a tremendous game changer for us here in the U.S. Now, hemp farmers are specifically authorized to access what's called crop insurance, as well as grants and certifications. The crop insurance allows farmers to know that their crop will always have an end buyer, and certainly with the crop insurance, it gives farmers a great bit of comfort knowing they can plant the crop and receive benefit from so doing. It's anticipated that a hemp futures market will actually develop in Chicago, so hemp will be traded right alongside wheat, corn, soybeans, etc. on the Chicago Board of Trade, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I think that's tremendously positive. And of course, U.S. native lands and tribal governments are specifically authorized to cultivate and produce hemp. Many of these U.S. Tribal nations have a tremendous amount of agricultural land that's currently fallow. Certainly, they also have water reserves. It's very interesting to note that hemp can be grown without any agricultural chemicals, no fertilizers, no pesticides, no Monsanto glyphosate or other GMO necessary, and certainly it only uses about 1/3 the water requirements that crops such as corn, wheat, soybeans, etc. Will use. Interference with interstate commerce of hemp and hemp products is specifically prohibited. It'll be taken away from the oversight and auspices of the Drug Enforcement Agency. The new Farm Bill does not affect what's called the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, which provides the U.S. FDA with authority to regulate permissible ingredients in ingestible products. And certainly the FDA will still continue to monitor and potentially regulate the nutritional supplement market. We believe the FDA is going to allow us to be one of the top producers who are able to get our products up to a very high standard, a high level of testing and certification to where we will certainly pass. In fact, we're one of, maybe even the first, to have this new seal of approval from the U.S. Hemp Authority, which is now taking on an oversight role within the industry, because at some point we know the government is going to want to regulate us, so why not regulate from inside? Why not make our own certification standards up to a very high level? And only a few companies will be able to have eventual future products that will qualify at this very high CGMP level, certified good manufacturing practices that go along with good agricultural practices, good laboratory practices, etc. What this means is you'll have a wonderful, well-tested end product for human use and consumption. Now, in terms of practicality, the passage of the Farm Bill galvanizes tremendous momentum across the cannabis industry throughout the world, really. We see significant amounts of hemp and CBD in the supply chain, ancillary services providers, etc., all being empowered by this nice passage of the Farm Bill. The legalization of hemp and CBD provide comfort to large-scale retailers to bring CBD products into their stores. We've been talking with groups such as Whole Foods and other natural grocers for many, many years now. And of course, with the quasi-legal federal regulations, they've been kind of fence sitters, if you will. But we think this will now get them over the fence, and hopefully our products will soon be in some of these very large grocery and other retail stores. The passage of the bill will also allow banks and financial institutions the ability to provide services to us. We've been previously, it's been very difficult for us to do normal things such as banking, paying employees by actual paycheck, do merchant processing, etc. When we do merchant processing, it's been at a very high risk rate with very high and exorbitant fees. We'll certainly be able to provide more normal services with a much more normal feel than what we have been able to do in the past. And certainly these events will encourage investment and capital infusion into various businesses, infrastructure, to take advantage of the many industrial uses of hemp. Here in the U.S., we don't really have any infrastructure to do hemp biomass for biofuels, or hemp textiles, or hemp building construction materials, but that's all going to change. And even hemp nutrition, we're very excited about some of the changes coming up here. More in terms of practicality, this bill initiates actions by federal, state, local agencies to act affirmatively to authorize and regulate hemp, plus its derivative products, of course, including CBD. There are many states who have decided to consider CBD as a Schedule 1 controlled substance, and certainly they're going to have to reconsider now as CBD is legal federally. Many states, such as Alabama, are already moving in this direction. Some states might need a little kick in the pants, if you will, and certainly we will be pressing forward with some litigation that may, of course, eventually win the day because, again, federal law in the U.S. trumps state law, if you will. Now, since hemp is no longer a part of the U.S. Controlled Substances Act, the Drug Enforcement Administration now lacks any authority regarding hemp or CBD. Of course, in recent years, as I mentioned, the DEA had considered CBD to be a Schedule 1, a controlled substance, even though they didn't follow their procedures, and this certainly is going to make them reconsider some of their previous statements. Certainly it gives the FDA as well to reconsider its stance on CBD as well as its enforcement actions, and its enforcement division, the DEA, is now prohibited from any interference in the now legal CBD trade. CBD from verifiable hemp sources is totally legal, and certainly CBD from marijuana continues to remain illegal at the U.S. in terms of federal level. And this is why many companies are now moving into the isolate market. I think Randy and I are probably going to talk about that a little bit later on, but many companies, of course, are sourcing their CBD from marijuana, and of course this is still illegal by the hemp farm bill, but basically since at the end you're able to separate out THC and CBD and then utilize this illegal, if you will, CBD, and basically it is something that you, at that point, you can't necessarily distinguish isolate that comes from CBD, from hemp rather, from marijuana, which is why this market is becoming fairly popular. But again, the isolated CBD, yes, has an effect, but only a certain effect. We really think when you have a great amount of these entourage botanicals along with it, you get the better, the more interesting, the more magnified effects that many of our products certainly confer. Now, going forward, there's certainly a lot of work to still be done. The USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture must now take charge of national hemp regulation, policy implementations. The FDA should ensure that hemp-derived cannabinoids, including extracts from CBD, are to be treated as permissible. The FDA's own scientists conclude that CBD has no abuse potential, does not pose a risk to public health. It should not be withheld from Americans who count on it for their health and wellness. And certainly this should resolve the in-state discrepancies that many states and those people in states such as Connecticut, Ohio, North Dakota, Alabama, etc. Already, as I mentioned, there's been positive movement forward in the state of Alabama. Now, for us, what does this mean? As CBD derived from hemp is now legal, of course, many retail stores will be able to start to sell CBD products on their shelves. With the legality, many of these fence sitters, especially the nutritional supplement companies, will be offering CBD products, so yes, there will be more competition. With recent action, CBD cannot be considered part of the United Nations single convention treaties. Thus, it's going to open up many more international opportunities for us to be able to get into these countries, as now the U.S. has moved, so the rest of the world moves. We'll definitely be distinguishing hemp and CBD from marijuana and THC, although great things are also happening on the marijuana and THC side. Maybe coming up as soon as this March 2019, I may be having a similar presentation talking about the end of prohibition of marijuana, cannabis, etc. Things are really moving very rapidly in this direction at the international level. The World Health Organization taking very strong action to potentially work with the United Nations to have a United Nations member vote to fully remove cannabis from these United Nations single convention treaties coming up in March of 2019. FDA obviously may require CBD nutraceutical products to all be at that high CGMP manufacturing standards, which we're already working on that. Certainly we'll be ready if and when that time comes. And of course now our company may potentially be able to source some of our hemp and CBD from U.S. domestic sources. Our company is growing exponentially. Certainly we're currently sourcing from Europe, but at some point if we grow large enough, well, our European supply is only going to be large enough to fit the European market. Potentially we might need American supply to fit the American market, unless we're looking to see if we can take some of the wonderful European hemp seed and bring it to the U.S. and still get a very similar crop to what we do in Europe. We're working on this with some of our farmers and genetic engineers at this time. Now, other benefits, certainly many opportunities will open themselves for investment. Parent company Medical Marijuana Inc. is going to be very large in the way of participating here. One of the great things is that now research opportunities in the U.S. will be allowed. Since 2015, we've been trying to do CBD-based research here in the U.S., some very simple studies. For those of you in the medical field, the early stage pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic studies. We've also been talking with UC San Diego neurology department for about the last three and a half years to try to do a study on the very early stage Parkinson's, what's called pre-Parkinson's or essential tremor. And certainly now we have the opportunity to participate in some of these studies. We look forward to more announcements as time goes along here, but certainly this is very exciting to be able to do research here in our own backyard. We also have recently received FDA, what are called free sale certificates. This is going to allow us, again, for more ease of international commerce without the large amount of taxes that many times are put on us. The fact that we're now through this FDA free sale process is quite beneficial for us. And of course, senior management can potentially sleep well at night knowing that our products are fully legal throughout the U.S. and soon to be throughout the world. Now, we're also interested to look at some of the hemp consumer products, particularly hemp seed oil, hemp protein powder. Of course, in the U.S., we have a tremendous business importing about $600 million worth of these hemp food products every year from Canadian sources. What has to happen here, since hemp has previously been illegal, is that those seeds, hemp seed, has to actually be irradiated in Canada before it can be brought into the U.S. And of course, what happens here, when you irradiate food, you tend to decrease its nutritional value. And the reason they've done this is so that if someone, enterprising said, well, gosh, I'm going to take a bag of hemp seed, plant this out in my backyard and grow a hemp crop. Well, you can't really do that with the irradiated seed. So now, getting our hemp from U.S. domestic sources, it will not have to be irradiated, and we will finally see the full nutritional benefit of these hemp seed products, and soon we hope to be bringing more in the way of consumer-friendly, consumer-oriented hemp seed oil, hemp protein powder products to our growing group of Kannaway distributors. And continuing along on some of the benefits, of course, many fence-sitting customers will be much more willing to try CBD. We've really seen a very interesting piece put out by CNBC. This is a financial news channel in the U.S., a consumer news and business channel, stating that by the year 2022, they anticipate that the U.S. market for CBD is going to grow to $20 billion per year. Now, this is significant because Forbes next year, 2019, is projecting that the CBD market is going to be a $1.2 billion annual market. But if you take that and look where it's going to go in 2022, in 3 years, you're talking about 16 times the growth. So again, everything today is very, very much at the ground floor level. But if you can imagine being in a business that in the next 3 years is going to grow 16 times, wow, that's very significant. We're looking forward to tremendous things here. For our company, basically, if we can just follow this trend and increase our sales by 16 times, by the year 2022, we'll be selling $1 billion worth of hemp CBD products. Well, of course, CBD is now going to take on an increasingly large share of the overall cannabis market, as many more people are now going to start coming in. The regular THC users are going to say, oh gosh, well, this is a legal substance, let me try it. And gosh, when these people start to see the synergies and how this really helps benefit those THC users and how it benefits your overall levels of health and wellness, I really think this is going to be a wonderful trend that CBD in the end might take as much as 40% of that very large overall cannabis market. The odds are very positive now that federal marijuana legislation is certainly in the wings. Obviously, getting over the first hurdle with hemp and the rest has been a tremendous move forward. But certainly, if you're in Las Vegas and the odds makers are betting on the end of prohibition of overall cannabis, we've now really taken a quantum leap forward. And I think this has great benefit because a rising tide takes all ships. And certainly, CBD will likely become much more affordable over time. So hopefully, we'll be able to participate in some of what we call the economies of scale, making our products more available, more affordable, and yet still maintaining nice margins and allowing great opportunities for people to build tremendous businesses and develop really many little empires. Just a couple more words here now. In terms of herbal medicine and the botanical drug, there's an interesting pathway, even through the US FDA, regarding botanical drug development. We certainly are very excited about this possibility. Now, the odds aren't particularly good. There have only been one product so approved in the US out of 500 companies who've actually applied for a botanical drug, but certainly we think we have a wonderful product with the regulatory and documentation behind us to be able to get this across the finish line. Now, many other countries, such as Mexico, Brazil, others in Latin America, are much more accepting of these natural botanical remedies if you can prove that it's safe and it works as well, or if not better, than some of the pharmaceutically developed versions. And certainly, when you're talking about a pharmaceutically developed version of CBD, you're talking about that CBD isolate, which, yes, has an effect, but nowhere near the entourage effect level of some of our company's products. And our recent studies and research in Mexico as well as in Brazil in terms of epilepsy and other medical conditions is really proving this out, that we really have some wonderful therapeutics that not only are reducing seizure episodes in children, but also are helping them very much to develop more normally. So instead of having the side effects of traditional pharmaceutical meds, you're actually having side benefits, if you will, in terms of improvements in overall levels and quality of life. Now, of course, in the future, we're potentially excited about, at least at the medical level, possibly having combination THC and CBD products. It does seem for some people with chronic pain, etc., that the combination of THC and CBD works very well to interfere with the brain's natural feedback loop in terms of pain. So in the end, we might have a 90% CBD to 10% THC concentration, or an 80-20 formula that certainly we're looking to develop some of this in these legal cannabis markets such as Canada, potentially to export to countries such as Mexico, Brazil, by doctor prescription initially, but at some point this might even change in the US, and certainly over in the EU, the European Parliament is working very hard to try to legalize cannabis, at least for medical purposes, throughout the entire EU. So certainly we're looking to the future, and potentially at some point we might have some THC, CBD combination products available. Now for Kannaway, we're also looking at what are called THC analogs, or these are components very similar in chemical nature to THC, but do not confer the actual high. And these are natural plant compounds that can potentially be mixed in with CBD to give people the benefits that I was just talking about, interfering with that pain feedback loop cycle, yet without giving you the high, without potentially being considered a scheduled substance. So certainly with CBD being legal, combining with other natural legal plant analogs, we might already be able to develop sometime in the next year or two very interesting products that will give you that THC-like effect without the high. So future CBD products, certainly we see people such as Bruce Linton, who's the CEO of Canopy Growth Corporation, a very large Canadian licensed producer, say that the future is in products, the future of cannabis, because it's very interesting to see that around the globe, smoked cannabis is on the decline. And what people are really looking forward to using are these infused products, the value-added products, your THC or CBD within foods, within various oils, tinctures, and preparations. And certainly these value-added products do seem to be the ones that will be the future of the overall cannabis industry. And certainly with CBD, products are the name of the game here. We've been working to develop these wonderful products since 2011. We're, of course, very excited about some of the combinations of your cannabinoids, terpenoids to potentially address specific disease indications. And over the next few years, we'll be working on this very significantly. Now, just to summarize some of this, hemp is now fully legal in the U.S. as an agricultural commodity. This is certainly very exciting. My ancestors who came over to the U.S. on the Mayflower back in the 1620 era, about 400 years ago, what did they bring with them? Hemp seed. What was the first, agriculturally developed crop that the pilgrims and colonized or civilized Americans plant? It was hemp. You used to be able to pay your taxes with hemp in the U.S. And certainly to bring back this amazing agricultural crop with all the tremendous benefits for our society, I think is going to add percentage points back to our nation's gross domestic product. It's certainly going to be a wonderful rotational crop for many farmers to utilize. We are just very excited about the development of a hemp futures market. Certainly, we definitely look forward to participating in all these great ancillary businesses, and certainly the derivatives from hemp. CBD are now fully legal throughout the U.S. and no longer part of the Controlled Substances Act. Again, the U.S. Department of Agriculture will be the group that has the power to regulate national hemp crop. We'll work with state regulators to establish in-state regulations, and certainly this is going to accelerate our expansion plans throughout not only the U.S. but also throughout the globe. Certainly very exciting. As the U.S. goes, so goes the world. Quality, of course, control is going to be paramount. Those companies need to distinguish ourselves even further from the competition. Certainly we're very hard to work at a lot of the logistics that go on behind us delivering a package of our products to you all. And certainly we love these combination products, CBD perhaps plus vitamins, CBD plus herbs, that can potentially, again, even accelerate this entourage effect that we've been talking about for the past years. Hemp legalization puts us certainly one step further in terms of a U.S. DA, a U.S. Department of Agricultural status, where we may be able to actually get, just like vitamin C did, a recommended daily allowance or a recommended daily intake. And we've been very hard to work at 50 milligrams of CBD daily to, again, support the very large self-regulatory system, the endogenous cannabinoid system within the human body. Well, I think that's all I have in terms of my prepared remarks. Certainly there's great things going on at the U.S. Here with the passage of the Farm Bill. We're very excited to be part of this at this historic time for us. Many of us have been working for years and years to get this across the finish line. Finally, we've come to that day, at least for industrial hemp, and it's a thrill to be president and CEO of our parent company at this point in time and in the future.
Fantastic, Stuart. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, so I asked Stuart to be here this evening for a couple of reasons. It was the first to answer the questions about what exactly does this mean today for us, for our business. And I want to expand on a couple of thoughts. Stuart said a few times during this presentation, now CBD is fully legal in the United States. And some of you might be saying, well, wait a minute, we've been saying that it's legal for some period of time. Remember, we've been operating under a Ninth Circuit Court ruling that said hemp could be legally imported to the United States if and only if, and there were a variety of characteristics applied to that, a variety of restrictions placed upon it. And so within the context of finding not a loophole, but a legal way to do this business, we were still swimming upstream against the DEA saying CBD is a Schedule I drug. And so even though we have been operating legally on a federal level, bringing products in under a ruling by the Ninth Circuit Court, this completely changes the playing field. Because today we can say, period, CBD is federally legal, and there is no longer controversy about that point. Controversy is behind us. Now, many years ago, I am in trying to create an income generating model, trying to understand how a new company could enter an arena, how a new individual could enter an arena and gain market share. Here's what I learned. If the market for anything, is staying the same size, then if Stuart enters the market, and the only people in that market are today Randy and Blake and Alex, for example, and if we're meeting the needs of the market, then when Stuart enters it and begins to compete, he will get some because he's good, but from whence will it come? If Alex and I and Samantha were meeting the needs of the market, then Stuart will get some by taking some from us, isn't that right? And so if the market's staying the same size, then what we see are new companies and new people entering the market and earning a little bit, and they continue to enter until they don't earn enough that it becomes attractive to somebody else, and the market then reaches its point of satiety. If the market is shrinking, then even there's not room for a new person to join, and some of the good people that are in it get squeezed out of the business. But what if the market is growing so dramatically that the current providers in the market can't keep up with the demand? Then at that point, there's no restriction to growth. And so what Stuart just described was a legitimate projection that CBD sales in the United States could go from $1.9 billion in 2019, $1.2 billion in 2019, to potentially $20 billion 3 years from now. And so when people have asked me, the question that's come across my desk has been, well, Randy, what about the increased competitive forces, because now one doesn't have to have the degree of sophistication that our company has? My response, validated by Stuart today, is, folks, this market's going to grow to $20 billion in the next 3 years. And no matter how good we are not yet in a position to satisfy a $20 billion market.
For sure we are.
So whatever else anybody does really doesn't impact us. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that 100%. Absolutely.
Okay. Now the next...
Plenty of money out there, and you just have to go ahead and get it.
Just go on out and get it. That's exactly right. Now next, Stuart talked a little bit about isolates, and I want you to expand on that just a little bit. For people who are new to our business, we've got just a couple of guests here this evening that are new to our company and to the products that we sell. An isolate. Describe to me more. What does it mean to be an isolate versus a full spectrum product?
Certainly. Well, if you do an extraction, let's say, from your hemp crop that you've just grown, you've done your harvest, and now you take your harvested hemp over to the extraction facility and you do an extraction. Generally, the first level of extraction, you'll get a wide range of chemical compounds. You'll get CBD in a very high concentration because that's how we grow it, but you'll also get a whole bunch of trace cannabinoids, and then maybe as much as 400 other plant compounds. Your plant waxes, your chlorophyll, your terpenes, which are your essential oils, or your flavonoids, etc. And all these chemical compounds potentially work together to produce a very high magnified, what we call the entourage effect. But certainly you can isolate out these chemical compounds. You can isolate out terpenes, you can isolate out flavonoids, and you can isolate out cannabinoids. So we can actually take out CBD just in its very pure form, and then of course we could take that pure CBD and make other products with it. And yes, there'll be a benefit because it's CBD,
okay,
but it's not CBD plus all your other goodies that come along with it.
So the key point here is that I'm quite alert to what's going on with this rush to market by so many companies out there. And the easiest and least expensive way to enter the CBD arena is to do it all with isolate. And so we see company after company after company jumping on the bandwagon with a product that is good, but it's not in the same realm as our product. A full spectrum product gaining the entourage effect is simply better. And so when we see this rush of companies coming to market, trying to get on the bandwagon in the quickest way they possibly can, the least expensive way they can, sure enough, they will get their piece. But the piece they get simply doesn't influence us. I want you to know that. Next, I think of when I was watching the slide, I couldn't stop myself from smiling because while I care deeply about every Kannaway brand ambassador everywhere in the world, I've been very keyed in to the plight of some of our Kannaway brand ambassadors in certain states where the state itself has not recognized the legality at the federal level because of the Ninth Circuit Court. They've continued to point to the DEA saying that CBD was a Schedule I drug. And so to Renita and Scott Brannon and to the rest of you wonderful people in North Dakota and in Alabama and in some of our other markets where you've literally walked on eggshells. When Stuart said, what happens now? He said that senior management can go to sleep at night not wondering what might happen overnight. Now our great brand ambassadors in these various states that have felt like they're walking on eggshells don't need to walk on an eggshell anymore. Is that fair enough?
Very fair. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Absolutely.
beautiful. And then the next thing, we've all seen, I'm sure that those of you who have participated in it have been more than fascinated but thrilled with this unbelievable explosion of success that we've had in Europe in the last period of time. And I noted also with great joy the fact that now with this changing of the way the United States sees CBD, that some of the international conventions will view it differently, and that may well accelerate our ease of opening into other international markets. Is that also?
I think that's a very fair comment. Absolutely, yes. We're quite excited about the overall change in attitude. Of course, the U.S. was the instigator behind the United Nations Single Convention Treaties of 1961 and 1971 regarding marijuana being controlled substance, a narcotic substance with no medicinal use. That certainly, that notion is changing quite rapidly throughout the globe. Eventually, we think THC and marijuana will get around to being where hemp is today. But over time, especially with the United Nations member nations meeting March of 2019, certainly actions in the U.S. today, the hemp actions will be talked about at this meeting. And of course, many nations are going to say, well, gosh, hemp isn't part of this UN Single Convention Treaty. We should allow it into our country and let the people benefit from a wonderful natural health and wellness supplement. Certainly the science supports this.
And one other thing that is so immediately obvious to me, and it might not be quite as obvious to you yet because you don't know the man, but there is one thing that separates us from anybody in the industry, and it always will, and that is this man sitting right here on the chair. This is the person that gave rise to the entire CBD movement. And this person is the CEO of our parent company. And this person is not creating products for anybody else. This person is not doing research for anybody else. This is our intellectual property. And I have great joy and satisfaction and pride in that. I also want to say something that would be outside of Stuart's realm and more directly in my realm. We stand alone. We stood alone before the passing of the Farm Bill of 2018. We stand alone now. But I want to describe something else that has not been covered here at all. Let's imagine for a moment that there were another company offering CBD and that you built a business in that company. For instance, another direct selling company, well intended I'm sure, just announced that they would launch a CBD product line in January. You know what? They operate a compensation plan that is called a cycling binary. Now, I want you to imagine for a moment that you take all of the facts and figures that are our company and that you build only a small business, a 15,000 volume point per month business. And that 15,000 volume point per month business, as a result of the generosity and the brilliance and the foresight of our company and the creators of the compensation mechanism, that 15,000 volume point business in Kannaway will create for the brand ambassador a $2,500 per month income. That's not huge, but it's not insignificant. That exact same business in a cycling binary would produce $280 in income. And so you see, one of the things that I challenge people to do is look at all that we are. Look at all that we are. We are the premier provider of phytocannabinoid products in the world, period. We are that today. We will remain that. But separate and distinct from being the premier provider of the products, we are also the premier provider of opportunity for those who represent the products. And as singular and unique as is and has been and will be our product offerings is our compensation mechanism. What sets Kannaway apart? It's a combination of things. It is the people who own it, the people who operate it, the product idea, the proven ability to innovate. The simplest way, the easiest way to project the future is just to carefully and critically study the past. Those people who had the great ideas that got us here are the same people that have the great ideas that'll get us there. And one of those great ideas was the ability to create a compensation mechanism that simply makes more people more money more quickly. And I think that that's of critical importance, and that plays the way through the entire scale. Now, a moment ago, my son Blake, who is the CEO of this company, of Kannaway, and the Chief Operating Officer, there he is. I thought maybe I'd lost him. Blake, come on in here. So I just notified Blake that Stuart will be here making this presentation this evening, and I asked him if he'd come on in at the conclusion and just share his thoughts. My thought for you, and I'll have just a couple of more concluding comments before we end, but in my view, the future is bright. But Blake, come on up here and tell folks anything that you'd like to add, comment, or editorialize on what's going on here.
Sure. Thanks, Randy. Thanks, Stu. Great to be with you all tonight. Today's a great day. And you can go back, gosh, I don't know how long ago. When did you guys launch the first ever CBD product?
It was the spring of the year 2012.
Spring of 2012. This man and his partner launched the first ever CBD product. Today's a day for celebration. It was a fight, and I remember Stu sitting down and telling me how that was in 2012 to launch the very first CBD product ever in the history of the world, and then move it from California to other states and then to other countries. And quite an accomplishment, and I think that the world owes Stuart Titus and his partner just a heavy thank you. As today, things are changing in our country. And as I look at it and I look around, and Randy just commented on it a little bit, you can now see that lots of people are going to get involved in this space. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I saw some marketing for a company, and they said they're not going to be the first in class, because they're not, because Kannaway was the first in class, but they're going to be the best in class. And I've got to laugh at that just a little bit. You're talking about a company that launched the first ever CBD product in the world, who took it across state lines for the first time ever in the history of the world, who took it international for the first time ever in the history of the world, who offers a wide range of CBD products. And some companies coming along and they're going to launch an isolate product and they're going to call it best in class. That's a little embarrassing. Sorry. Anyway, this is the company that changed the world. This is a true cannabis company. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Beware of the imitators. Beware of the people who have the shiny new object, who are just going to jump into this space, who have no idea what they're doing, who have no idea what they're talking about, who have no idea where they're going, and get involved with the world's first ever publicly held cannabis company, the first company to ever launch a CBD product, and we will continue to break down barriers as we go along the way. It's a privilege to be associated with that company and with you, Stuart. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Randy.
Awesome. Blake, thank you for being here. Stuart, thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
So, folks, once again, my final thoughts for you are the future is bright. I've been among the most fortunate people in this direct selling industry since February 1st of 1990, when, thank God, I said yes to it, and my life has been blessed every step of the way. Never has there been a moment of such profound importance as this moment. Write it down and say you heard it here first. If we were to gather again 12 months from now, and when we look back at those months we now look forward to, we're going to see a greater expansion, a greater explosion of growth, both domestically and internationally, in current international markets, and some soon to be announced. The coming 12 months will be more profound than the last 12 months. Write it down and say you heard it here first. And I wish to each one of you, whoever you are and wherever you are, whatever your cultural and spiritual background is, to the degree it's appropriate for you, I wish your family a Merry Christmas. If what's more appropriate for you is to wish you Happy Hanukkah, I wish you Happy Hanukkah. If you have no affiliation with any known religious or spiritual group, then I would simply wish to you joy, peace, and harmony in your families. And I hope that today and every day going forward is better than the one before. So God bless you all. Thank you. Good night. Do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Appreciate
Thank you.
it so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.